I feel like there's a lot of people out there who are emptily sharing these infographics who can't really relate the infographics to their local communities, to how this affects their lives, to how this affects their peers' lives, their families even, right? And I thought I would shed some light for my fellow Bay Area people on how this could potentially affect the Bay Area community. So for those of you that don't know, there's this little community in Fremont, California, which is probably about 25, 30 minutes from where I live in the South Bay, but it's in the East Bay, and there's actually, fun fact, a huge population of Afghan-Americans living in the East Bay. And I'm talking all over the East Bay, but they're mostly concentrated in the Fremont and Newark area. And there's actually a community in Fremont, California called Little Kabul in one of the neighborhoods in Fremont. And you know, obviously, like I make fun of Fremont. I always know it. I've heard it. You know, you hear Fremont, you think India, you think Asia, right? Like Little Asia, Little India. But there's actually a really big Afghan population in Fremont. And what's crazy to think is that the Bay Area, I looked this up on Wikipedia, has the is number one in the whole entire country for the amount of Afghan Americans that live throughout the Bay Area. So this is probably affecting someone that you know, or someone that you indirectly know, or a business that you go to, right? Whether we like it or not. This Little Kabul is a neighborhood that was formed basically in the 1990s. And I kind of first heard about it through this book called The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. Read the book. It's fantastic. Would highly recommend. I'm going to talk about it a little later. And basically, it was a neighborhood that was... it's a neighborhood that basically was not created, but I mean de facto created by a lot of Afghans basically fleeing the Taliban in the first invasion when they took over back in 1996. A lot of refugees came to the Bay Area, and a lot of them settled in Fremont. And basically they created their own neighborhood called Little Kabul. There was a couple articles back in the day, back in the early 2000s, of talking about Little Kabul and how, you know, it was affected by 9/11 and the various racism that, you know, it endured because of that. But overall, like, Little Kabul is a neighborhood that I'm sure, you know, I'm sure there's a few people here who've heard of it. And I'm sure there's, you know, a few people that know people who are, you know, within that neighborhood. That's a fact. And I just thought I would bring up Little Kabul. I've been there a couple of times. I've never really, you know, explored the area. I would love to one day. But there are people in that neighborhood. They did a story on KTVU the other day, and they interviewed people in that neighborhood. And they were basically talking about how they have relatives who are scared for their lives. Business owners of like really good Afghan restaurants that I'm sure people go to, that I'm sure people are regulars at in Fremont. Like, you know, these are legit issues that are affecting people that live in this community, that live in our community and our local communities. Little Kabul is not very far from where we are. And people have relatives out there who are constantly being affected by this, or who are being affected by this, who can't get out of the country because it's just such an improbable situation. So I thought I would bring up the community of Little Kabul because, first of all, I think it's a community that doesn't get a lot of love. And I didn't honestly hear about until a couple of years ago, until I was, you know, doing research, or not even doing research, until I was just browsing the internet one day and I found out that there was this neighborhood called Little Kabul in Fremont, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people have heard of it. And second of all, I just kind of wanted to, you know, like, shed some light. Like, why should you care? Probably because you know someone, or you know someone who knows someone that is affected by this. And these are issues that are affecting local communities and people who live in this area, and particularly in the Bay Area that I love so much. It sucks to see people who live in a community that you love be hurt by something, you know, that's going on miles away, but that's just life. And I thought that I would, you know, bring that as a sense of relatability, because I think Little Kabul is an important neighborhood that maybe, you know, we should talk about, and we should, you know, bring up, because there are people there who are being affected by, indirectly affected by the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. So I thought that would be interesting to bring up.